But now speak on employment rights and migrants. Domestically, we had a lot of countries, including the United Kingdom, Costa Rica, Germany, Ireland, Laos, Netherlands, Nigeria, and others commenting on employment matters. To first address the domestic labour market, employment has remained relatively stable and our unemployment rate relatively low, currently around 4%. Nevertheless, the government is refocusing employment efforts by prioritising support for people who can work into work. The government wants to increase productivity and economic growth to create more opportunities, and in this way, wages can also be lifted. New Zealand's minimum wage is one of the highest in the OECD. The adult minimum wage increased by 2% in April 2024. All public service organisations are implementing diversity, equity and inclusion strategies. Data shows that gender and ethnic groups are well represented in the public service, matching their proportion in the wider population or close to it. However, further work is needed to improve leadership diversity and to address occupational segregation. In the private sector, more than 80 chief executives and chairs have formed a group called Champions for Change that is leading work to achieve inclusive and diverse workplace leadership. Other organisations, such as the Institute of Directors and Women on Boards, also focuses on increasing representation of women. The government will continue supporting women in leadership in both public and private sector. In 2023, New Zealand's gender pay gap was 8.3%. While that is below the OECD average, we will continue to work to close that gap. Voluntary gender pay gap reporting is an effective measure for this. And turning to the international employment perspective, New Zealand is one of the most ethnically diverse countries in the world. Nearly a quarter of New Zealanders were born in another country. Migrant workers, particularly temporary ones, make an important contribution to our economy. This includes addressing short-term labour and skills shortages. The use of migrant labour is particularly prevalent in tourism, primary industry and construction. In September 2023, there were about 162,000 temporary work visa holders in New Zealand. Unfortunately, there is evidence of migrant exploitation and human trafficking in New Zealand, and we have measures to combat this. The United States, alongside many other countries, including Uganda, Venezuela, Argentina, Armenia, Brazil, Bulgaria, Ecuador, Ghana, Iran, Oman, Iraq, Kazakhstan, Luxembourg, and Mongolia, amongst others, have asked questions about forced labour and trafficking. It has been asked around. New Zealand is not currently considering ratifying the Convention on the Protection of the Rights of All Migrant Workers and Members of their Family. New Zealand policy and practice differ from what is required by some provisions of the Convention. In particular, New Zealand does not automatically grant visas to enable families of temporary workers to reside in New Zealand, and would not grant priority to families of migrant workers over other work visa applicants. New Zealand's migrant settlement and integration strategy provides a comprehensive approach to effectively settle and integrate migrants in New Zealand. Employment is one of the areas it addresses. The government provides services and resources tailored to migrant and employer needs, which include educating migrants and their employers about employment rights and responsibilities. In April 2024, the government announced some changes to the visa category called Accredited Employer Work Visa. The introduction of an English language requirement will allow migrants to better understand their rights and raise concerns about an employer. New Zealand's efforts to eliminate people trafficking are set out in the Plan of Action Against Forced Labour, People Trafficking and Slavery, which was launched in 2021. The plan is a 5-year all-of-government response and sets out a high-level framework for actions. It's organised around 3 internationally recognised pillars of prevention, protection and enforcement. New Zealand has 4 liaison officers based in Kuala Lumpur, Colombo, Bangkok and Jakarta. They work with agencies and regions on issues relating to trafficking in persons and deliver programs on capacity building and prevention. In addition to domestic efforts, New Zealand is party to the United Nations Convention against Transnational Organised Crime and the Trafficking Protocol. New Zealand also plays an active role in the Bali process on people smuggling, trafficking in persons, and related transnational crime. In response to the United Nations 2021 assessment of New Zealand has launched a dedicated trafficking in persons pilot to review processes associated with the receipt, assessment, identification, and allocation of reported cases of trafficking, and to increase capacity to recognise and respond to this crime. New Zealand has also developed and delivered trafficking training to frontline officials. New Zealand has a number of instruments and initiatives in place to protect against human rights impacts on businesses. However, New Zealand does not have an overarching action plan on business and human rights. In 2019, New Zealand accepted the UPR recommendation to develop such an action plan, and initial work has taken place. The government will be considering options to develop this plan. The United Nations and Germany asked specifically about modern slavery legislation and global supply chains. New Zealand does not currently have specific laws requiring organisation to consider issues of modern slavery in their supply chains. New Zealand has non-legislative tools for addressing modern slavery in supply chains, including business guidance and government procurement policies aimed at addressing risks of modern slavery. We also have a range of offences and penalties for individuals and businesses directly involved in slavery and related exploitative practices. This includes employment laws relating to workplace exploitation, criminal provisions in the Crimes Act, and regulatory powers in the Immigration Act to prevent domestic and transnational people trafficking and slavery. Modern slavery supply chain legislation is not currently being developed, and the government is considering whether it will take further steps. On the third theme I'll speak to is New Zealand's inquiry into historic abuse of children in state